Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. Daddy, with your 2024 AEW All Out instant analysis. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, just moments after AEW All Out went off the air to break down every single thing that happened on AEW's second pay-per-view in a 3-week span. We will be breaking down every single match, the show in its entirety, and yeah, a lot of controversial things happened on Saturday night in Chicago, and we have plenty to say about those on tonight's show. Quickly, let's get into it. A reminder off the top that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all that good stuff. You can send questions and comments for the show. You can vote in pre and post show polls surrounding pay-per-views, which so many of you did tonight for All Out, and your votes will be factored into our analysis at the end of the show. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news posts on Fridays. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Now, because this is an instant analysis, generally this is the time of the show where I would crack open a cold one, but the Silver King, unfortunately, is riding solo tonight. No vintage Chris Vanini. Therefore, I'm not going to crack open a beautiful beer and have it get warm while I speak extemporaneously for 45 minutes, an hour, however long this show is going to go. So we're going to keep those in the refrigerator. We'll bring them back soon, probably for WWE Bad Blood next month, I believe, is going to be the next major event. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk AEW All Out, and we are rolling right into the instant analysis, folks, because the Silver King is taping this nearly at 1 a.m. Eastern here. And suffice to say, there is a lot to talk about. Let's go right to the main event. Swerve Strickland against Hangman Page in what became a lights-out, unsanctioned steel cage match. That stipulation was added coming out of Dynamite on Wednesday. Didn't happen on TV, happened in the arena after the show went off the air. Swerve wore new ring gear covered in fire with a picture of his burned home. They tried to hold each other on the apron so their heads would get crushed by the cage, as if it was, not operated by a human who just would have stopped it. In the meantime, Prince Nana threw a bunch of weapons into the ring. That was a really smart way to accomplish the weapon ad. They went back to the staple gun. Swerve no-sold every trigger pull, while Hangman sold all of them. Swerve then pulled out pictures of his family, stapled them to Page's chest and face. It slowed down with Hangman doing 2 lariats, one with barbed wire, as Swerve was sitting on the top rope. Hangman raked Swerve's head on more barbed wire. The blood started dripping from his head into a pool on the canvas. Then Page used a steel chair, but the referee stood on top of it to stop him from using it for some reason in an unsanctioned match, which did not make sense. Swerve took advantage with house call. Then he was supposed to jump off the referee's back for a buckshot lariat. I mean, that would have been sick, but he slipped and really hit nothing. Swerve returned steel chair shots and threw him into one of the chairs like a lawn dart. Then he brought out a cinder block for a gory driver. Luckily, only Page's lower back scraped it, and it looked gnarly. But if that went shoulders, head, that could have been even worse. After an extended setup in the corner, Swerve probably hit what I would consider the single best Swerve stomp of all time, off the turnbuckles through a table for a false finish. Now, it wasn't great because it was off the ropes through a table. It was great because it was actually executed. He put his feet right on the top of his shoulders, slammed him through that table onto the canvas. I loved that spot. Literal seconds after this, let me just repeat what the spot was. Swerve stomp, off the ropes, through a table. Seconds later, Hangman stands up, hits Deadeye. Then he grabbed a splinter of burned wood from Swerve's house, and they each tried to stab each other with it. Swerve ultimately stabbed it 4 times into Hangman's head. He tried for a 5th, only to eat a low blow and a powerbomb onto the cinder block for a false finish. Swerve got up for a powerbomb and house call of Hangman into the cage, plus another house call. Page did an avalanche powerbomb off the ropes and Deadeye. Then he yelled for Swerve to beg for mercy as he jammed a chair into his neck. Nana basically agreed, hey man, just give up, it's over. Swerve laughed. He held up 2 fingers. I missed why that was the case. Maybe someone can inform me. Then he collapsed. Hangman ripped out Swerve's grill, and he jammed a medical needle, a syringe, into his mouth. Then he delivered an unprotected full chair shot right on Swerve's head. Now, cameras zoomed out and cut away to not show it live. The seat exploded out of it. That made me think there was probably a pin or a mechanism to make it safe. It was gimmicked to a degree. I hope and I believe that was the case. But once that chair shot was delivered, the referee just called off the match, and I presume it was Hangman winning via knockout. And it was, to a much more extreme degree, really the same finish as the Seth Rollins versus Fiend match inside Hell in a Cell. The difference is that one was called a disqualification in a no rules match, which does not make any sense. And they only did that because they didn't want to change the title. Here, it was called a win for Hangman by knockout. But the finish, technically, was the same. There was no fall. There was no submission. He didn't check Swerve. He just ended the match because he thought it went too far, the referee, even though it was, again, unsanctioned. And, this has never happened to me, really. But I was kind of at a loss for words coming out of this match and All Out as a whole. And I usually save my analysis of the entire pay-per-view for our final grade segment. And don't worry, I will make sure there's plenty to talk about then as well. But I'm just trying to figure out AEW's target audience these days. Is it only adult men at this juncture? It's obviously fine to do a couple hardcore matches on a show. But when you move from tables and chairs and stairs and thumbtacks and even cinder blocks and light bulbs to blood drinking, staple guns, suffocation, syringes with drugs in them, and kayfabe unprotected chair shots, even if gimmicked, who is that meant to appeal to exactly? The comparison I can make is All Out, to me, felt like if you took Howard Stern from 1995 and dropped him into his show in 2024. You could get away with all of this shit back in the day. There were no rules. I grew up in that era. But now, is it really appropriate? Is this what people want? I make the Stern comparison because he's matured significantly over the years, and his audience has grown up alongside him. ECW died out for numerous reasons, most of them financial. But extreme hardcore, to a degree, deathmatch wrestling is not a thing these days for a reason, at least in the public sphere. Particularly not for a company that is trying to be a number 2 to WWE. Is this the branding that Warner wants for AEW as it signs a new 5-year deal? I guess so, right? Even beyond that, though, how does AEW expect to expand its product and audience if this is the type of show it's putting on? It was one thing for an unsanctioned lights out match to go crazy. That's fine. It's expected. It was technically after the show. Families could turn it off knowing it was going to be gruesome. All that shit. But the stuff in the other matches up and down the regular card, I don't know. Like, please don't get it twisted. No one is pearl clutching here. I'm not a Puritan. I curse. I watch violent action movies. I have no moral objection to adults doing this stuff. It is their own prerogative. Do whatever the hell you want to yourself. I know there's sickos and diehards who are going to slurp up whatever AEW provides, the core of core audience, the adult men who want more violent, real to a degree, professional wrestling. But I'm talking about the more casual fans, those who come in and out, those who have slunk away from watching weekly TV throughout 2024. Did this win them back? I just sat back after All Out went off the air, kind of perplexed at what transpired during the show, wondering whether it made business sense and whether AEW was delivering the product, not only that fans want, but that they expect from professional wrestling in 2024? And I can't answer that question. You individually can't answer that question. That's not a question that can be answered Saturday night or technically Sunday morning as I'm taping this, or even in a week to come. But there was a clear, concerted effort to put on a certain type of show on Saturday night. And what I'm trying to figure out is this what they want AEW to be going forward? Are they potentially going to turn All Out into a hardcore show every year, which would make sense, but it would be probably nice to get some forewarning on that? And ultimately, will this shock value programming, which is, again, why I make the Howard Stern comparison, is that going to bring fans back, bring new fans in? And are those the type of fans that are going to expand this product beyond the 700,000 people that watch weekly? I don't really have the answer to that right now. Oh, I'm also remembering we need to talk about the match. Extremely hot start, extremely cold middle. The fans were exhausted. They were definitely tired of the weapons and violence, given they had seen so much of it already throughout the show. But then moving into the extended finishing sequence, it did get hot again, mostly because they pulled out some more extreme stuff that was shocking and created fan response. I'm still sitting here wondering why the needle was necessary. Was it to numb him so he couldn't fight back? Was it poison of some kind? And if it was either of them, why stick it in his mouth instead of his arm or wherever? Why remove the grill to do that? Like, I think I may have misunderstood something about the needle. And if you want to clarify it for me, you can email us, you can, DM us, you can tweet me, whatever the case. But there was something about that aspect that I completely missed. Then you have the unprotected headshot gimmick chair. Absolutely. I'm quite confident it was. But as I've said before on this show, you can get a concussion from hitting a soccer ball or getting your head quickly jostled back and forth or through myriad other actions, even gimmicked. It felt like an unnecessary risk. Beyond all of that, and this is typical of most street fights and hardcore matches that you have seen in wrestling history, but they kicked out of so much crazy shit here. How could you realistically believe either of them can ever be put down with a single finishing move in the future? Like, let's say we get Swerve, Kazuchika Okada, and Okada hits him with a Rainmaker. It would be laughable if he took a pinfall from that, given everything that happened in this match. Similarly, to that end, I thought there were way too many instances of false finishes and also these guys taking major moves and then just getting up and doing more major moves seconds later. I mean, you gotta sell some shit. And I'm not saying they didn't sell, they did. It was a good match, well done across the board. But some of that didn't ring true to me. I'd much prefer these guys hit a big ass move and lay motionless for 30 seconds and even repeat that than just get up and do more moves after the fact, Hangman was the right, necessary, and appropriate winner, as we discussed. The only way to come back to this feud, someone's got to die. I have no idea how you follow this up. It was uncomfortable to watch, but that was the point. If you have a storyline involving invading a man's home, threatening his wife and child, and then another man setting fire to that person's childhood home, arson, you have no choice but to go this length. This was a paradigm, by the way, of how much story can add to a match and why it makes such a difference compared to just throwing two wrestlers out in the ring and saying, go have fun. Much of the wrestling was well executed. Some of the spots were fantastic. I know I will never watch it again. There are matches on this card I will rewatch before Thursday show. This will not be one of them. I don't know how to grade it. Honestly, I have no idea. 4.25 stars, A for the wrestling, 5 barbed wire bats to the skull for the antics. That's the grade for the match. Maybe I'll think more about it on Thursday. Let's move to the AEW Championship. Bryan Danielson against Jack Perry, who is the TNT champion, but it was not title versus title. Jack got a special entrance, driving his short bus to the arena. The Young Bucks were waiting with his scapegoat helmet, and folks in riot gear accompanied him to the ring, which had no one standing in it at the time, so that was kind of nonsensical. Bryan got a normal entrance, but with Final Countdown, that made it electric. There was one very light and short CM Punk chant during Jack's entrance. I don't believe there was another during the match. That was good. Danielson did a springboard nothing. He just threw his body at Perry ringside. I found that impressive just because he doesn't do it, Bryan hit an avalanche back suplex. Perry did cattle mutilation on Danielson. Bryan came back with a double underhook suplex off the apron to ringside and a bunch of head kicks. Perry did the snare trap and hit a nice lariat, then pulled the referee in as Danielson hit Bazaiku knee. Bryan was ready to kick Jack's fucking head in when the Young Bucks attacked, as was teased on television, with a TK driver. They got chased off by Blackpool Combat Club. Jack came back with a knee of his own. He kicked Bryan's fucking head in. Then he did yes, but with middle fingers, as some chanted no. Danielson caught him with the knee. Then Perry flipped out of a move and ate a second knee for a false finish. So Bryan kicked his fucking head in, and Jack set up defiantly, sticking his arms out like Raven for another knee as Danielson reigned supreme and retained his title. So it was a really good match that did not need the Bucks' interference whatsoever. The winner was expected. Perry did look strong in the loss. I would say he maybe looked too strong in the loss. It was kind of ridiculous how much he took and kept kicking out of. Doing the whole scapegoat deal, holding your arms out, accepting defeat, that has never been for me in wrestling. Now, it's one thing if you're like dead, but he was up, smiling, looking healthy, and he just took another knee to the face. So I didn't like the situational aspect of that. I don't have much more to say about the match itself, and we have a lot more to talk about. So I'm going to say 3.75 stars. B+ is the grade. As Danielson celebrated after the bell, Killswitch ran into the ring and headbutted him. Then he stared down Perry in the corner as Christian Cage entered with his Casino Gauntlet, not Money in the Bank briefcase, the Casino Gauntlet contract. He looked to the side, unfortunately indicating that he was waiting for something, and we saw Jon Moxley block his entrance to the ring. As the heel stepped forward, the rest of BCC plus Pac stood alongside Mox. Mox then went into the ring after the heels left, hugged and kissed Bryan, and BCC raised his arm, and you knew exactly what was coming. Claudio hit him with a European uppercut of all things. And Bryan just sat up, no-selling it, like it was a joke almost, but that with a facial expression that he was stunned, that they turned on him. Mox then grabbed a plastic bag and started suffocating Danielson to death as Pac held Wheeler crying in the corner, and Marina Shafir ran in to kick him. And this continued over a couple minutes until Danielson nearly died. Bryan, who had both hands free, by the way, could have poked a hole in this bag, yet he did not. The whole bag suffocation deal only works when the person is restrained because they're handcuffed, tied up, held back. That was not the case here, which kind of made it dumb. Fans chanted, "This is murder," and yeah, it was murder. I enjoyed the concept of BCC turning, probably getting renamed, I would hope, with Wheeler none the wiser because he would be the only person to object. Pac replacing Bryan is smart, given his aesthetic fits with the group, and Danielson's obviously retiring from full-time wrestling soon. Also, Death Triangle is gone, so you're kind of merging the two groups together. The initial appearance was obviously a surprise, but as soon as you saw the others with Mox, you knew they were turning. It's also interesting timing, given the three other than Mox just won the trios titles. And it's also notable that everyone in this group who knew about the turn was previously in WWE, whereas Yuta, the only AEW original, was not keyed in on the plan. Now, whether this will result, and I hate to even bring it up and have it not happen, but in the potential Shane McMahon appearance, that's unknown, but it certainly feels possible when you connect some of these dots. It was definitely a hot angle. It gets you to tune into TV and find out what's going to happen next. That is always the goal coming out of pay-per-views, or at least it should be. Did I love the idea of someone being suffocated like that in a professional wrestling ring? No. And yes, I know Terry Funk did it to Ric Flair back in the day. I've seen that many times, but wrestling was so much less serious then, and that was not as brutal and violent as this. And by the way, when that happened, NWA, I believe it was NWA at the time and not WCW, but I think, if memory serves, they almost got thrown off TBS because of this. This was just one of many similar things I did not like Saturday night, despite the wrestling on All Out and most of the card being fantastic. And in terms of any questions about Christian coming back out to cash in afterward, I saw people talking about that. This is not the first nor the last time something like that has happened, whether it be WWE or AEW. Sometimes you just got to let stuff go, okay? There's a ton of medical personnel around Danielson. Christian's not coming out and cashing in the contract and winning the title in that spot. It's just not going to happen. Now, I was never on board with the idea of Swerve winning back the AEW title from Bryan. So the fact that he should be written off for an extended period of time, that is positive. It puts Hangman and Moxley as the two most likely next AEW champions, despite Darby Allin, of course, being number one contender and Christian Cage holding the contract. Grand Slam is just 3 weeks away. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play the Danielson angle, how long he's kept off TV. Don't forget, Mox has been looking for Darby. Is he trying to take his number one contendership? Is he trying to bring him into the group? All of that is pretty interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if he wants Darby so he can just straight up take him out and try to claim that match. As far as Danielson, I would hold him off until Grand Slam. There's, I think, 2 shows between this All Out and Grand Slam. There is zero reason for him to be on television. He should not come back until he makes his entrance for that title match. Just film angles from home if you need to do anything. The follow-ups for Hangman and Mox are going to be super interesting. They're going to need to nail those on Wednesday. At least Mox. Hangman, theoretically, you could keep off TV for a little bit. But with Mox, they're going to need to nail it on Wednesday. Let's move to the International Championship. Will Ospreay against Pac. Ospreay cut a promo to end Rampage saying he's been chasing Pac throughout his entire career and now wants to prove he's surpassed him. He also said Pac can prove he's still at a high level by not wasting another opportunity. Ospreay mentioned the WWE gimmick, the man who gravity forgot, which, by the way, was a great slogan back in the day. This promo was actually the best part of the 3-hour Rampage collision block. Good stuff from Ospreay here. We'll talk about the rest of those shows on Thursday. Now, this was third on the card. Understandable standing ovation at the bell. Pac went high risk outside to start, so Ospreay followed with a sky twister ringside. Ricochet was shown watching backstage. Pac hit avalanche brainbuster that looked to land somewhat on Will's head. He sold a stinger, likely not real. Ospreay did his handspring tope and rebound head kick. There was a cool catch sequence off the ropes, resulting in a tornado DDT plus a Liger bomb from Pac. Then a running Spanish fly, Oz cutter, and perfect heel kick from Will. Pac countered an apron Oz cutter into a German suplex, with Ospreay landing super high on his collar, almost on his head. Pac added a Poison Rana into a Brutalizer. Ospreay answered with a Poison Rana that Pac no-sold. He immediately hit hidden blade to the front, collapsing on top of him for a false finish. Ospreay then flipped out of the same sequence from the ropes, hitting another blade for a false finish. He added Oz cutter, maintained neck control. Pac reversed Tiger Driver. Ospreay, by the way, didn't give a second thought to using it here. He hit a Hurricanrana, Pac did, but Will pulled him out of the cover into Styles Clash, hitting one more hidden blade for the win. Ricochet smirked watching on TV after the bell. This was simply an exceptional wrestling match. I'd say they left something on the table for a rematch. That would almost be insulting, given the level of work that they put in here. Some of the sequences were simply flawless. Really, the only thing missing was any semblance of a match story. It was a spot fest. But if you're going to do a spot fest, you do it exactly like this. The finishing sequence was sublime, with Pac looking really strong in defeat. I'm going to rewatch this, and I'm probably, almost certainly, going to regrade this when we come back around to Thursday's show. But right now, I'm at a 4.75 A+ rating. I would not at all be surprised if I'm at a full 5 stars by Thursday's show. My issue was I was watching football at the same time. I didn't get to pay pure undivided attention to it, and I need to do that in order to give something 5 stars. So again, I will definitely watch this back. You just cannot get wrestling like this most nights. It's a definite match of the year candidate in December. Can't wait to see them potentially rematch. Can't wait to see other incarnations of this that might come. Speaking of, Ospreay, during an interview later in the show, he basically challenged Ricochet. So Ricochet storms in, saying Ospreay was talking shit, which was not exactly the case. And I shit you not, okay? This guy Ricochet said, "Don't you worry," 5 times in less than 30 seconds. He also told the guy who just put on an A+ match, an arguable match of the year, to get better. And he said like 2 or 3 other really silly phrases. I was thinking when he came in, when he stormed in there, okay, here is your chance to cut a heated promo for a dream rematch that everyone wants. And instead, it was as bad as ever from him. I obviously want to see Ospreay Ricochet, but I am surprised they're rushing it this soon. The next pay-per-view is 5 weeks away. And I guess Grand Slam is, of course, in a couple weeks. But this feels like something you want to save for a huge show. I'm talking Double or Nothing, Full Gear, All Out, All In. I don't know why you would just do this because they really seem like they're fighting soon on Grand Slam or even Wrestle Dream. I mean, again, it's not that those shows are bad, but a match like this that people have been waiting for, 5+ years to see, it deserves some gravitas. And a lot of times AEW just kind of throws stuff together and says, hey, we'll just do it now. And like, maybe that's not the worst thing in the world because it's exciting and you're giving fans what they want. But eventually that's going to catch up with you. So we'll see when this is booked. Maybe we'll find out on Wednesday. MJF fought Daniel Garcia. This opened the main card. MJF posed with a thank me later flag dropping instead of the remixed American flag. Garcia, who was wearing a black bandage around his whole head for what was only a small cut on Dynamite, attacked MJF from behind without an entrance. Oh, also MJF was wearing like shit brown colored tights. Very odd look. MJF completely dominated in the early going. They did the vertical suplex over the rope spot. MJF did the knee powerbomb back inside before biting Garcia, preceding a blade job. The head was gushing. Garcia was dead weight just like in the past. The referee did absolutely nothing about this in kayfabe. MJF kissed him on the cut and tried an avalanche pile driver, but Garcia stopped him. And I shit you not, he held open MJF's mouth and forced him to drink his blood. He also hit an avalanche DDT for a rope break fall. Garcia kicked out of a Panama Sunrise and kind of did like an Ultimate Warrior power-up, except it was not believable at all. MJF spit a huge loogie in his face. Garcia no-sold the German suplex, then countered a Boston Crab into a crossface, countered back into a crossface, then into a sharpshooter. MJF trapped 3 of his limbs, but Garcia reached the ropes with his free leg. Garcia collapsed in avoidance of another Panama Sunrise, then got a jackknife cover false finish. He had MJF in a guillotine of some kind, but refused to let the referee drop MJF's arm. Instead, he hit a pile driver for a false finish. Dumb babyface shit. Then MJF just hit a low blow with the referee distracted and then did like a side jackknife cover. I don't even know if that's a real thing to get the win. MJF offered a handshake after the bell. Garcia took it, then caught a cheap shot knowing it was coming. He kicked MJF in the low blow area in the groin. He then spit a loogie back in his face. And then while on the top rope, he did an avalanche pile driver before mimicking the choking motion that MJF used on him. This was kind of a deflating end to a match that was, for a while, building to a crescendo, but it was completely appropriate given the story being told. And it was ultimately an excused loss for Garcia. But it was dumb babyface shit to not take the dub when you can get it. And the way Garcia moves through matches, he's just really not the smoothest. Look, the blood dripping and loogie spitting stuff for me, it's just ridiculous, particularly when you consider that a street fight and an unsanctioned match were still to come on the card. There was a lot of good work here. I'm certainly curious as to whether this is going to continue immediately. They're going to take a pause. Is MJF going to go on vacation or something? I mean, he was basically hospitalized coming out of this match. This should, at least for him, be a 1-month write-off, and it probably needs to end with an ambulance match or something. This one's really tough grading. It is right on the border for me. I'm going to say 4 stars, A-, but it's like, again, if it was getting a numerical grade, it would be like a 90. Like it's right there next to a B+. If you're on either side of it, I basically completely agree with you. The TBS Championship was on the line. Mercedes Moné against Hikaru Shida. Mercedes backstage at Collision asked why Christopher Daniels was all up in her business. Then she threatened to have Camille get involved later in the show. Shida ultimately beat down a Purrazzo. Moné entered to distract as Camille ran her over from behind. Mercedes then swung a kendo stick, whacking Camille instead of Shida and hitting Katana on Mercedes to stand tall. Shida did. This is precisely why I said on Thursday's show that banning Camille from this match was illogical when she had not gotten involved in anything yet. Here, she finally did get involved, yet Sheeta still won the segment. The booking should have been Camille laying out Sheeta on Wednesday, then getting banned from ringside during Collision in response. So far, she's been irrelevant alongside Mercedes. Not exactly a valuable heavy or anything like that. Now, getting to the match. This was fast-paced at the bell with Sheeta getting her offense early. Monet came back with a hanging double knees in the corner. Sheeta threw her face first into the middle turnbuckle, hit a missile dropkick. Mercedes got a crossface locked in and did a sunset flip powerbomb into the corner that was kind of rough, plus a running Meteora. Sheeta answered Three Amigos with 3 Falcon Arrows. Mercedes hit a backstabber. Sheeta did a running knee, then hit 2 katanas. The first one kind of missed. For some reason, she didn't go to a cover after 2, even though she's pinned numerous people after 1. She hits 2, doesn't go for a cover. Then hits a 3rd. Covers Mercedes. She kicks out at 1 or rolls out of the ring. It was absurd. Then a tug of war transpired over Sheeta's kendo stick. Monet's shoulder got run into the post. Sheeta wasted time considering using the stick. Mercedes avoided a Meteora. Sheeta sold a knee. So Mercedes put her into Monet Maker, but couldn't get it executed. So she put her down, took out the knee, and then hit Monet Maker for the win. The crowd was comparatively dead for this because, it was exhausted. The work was strong for portions of the match. I have no clue what happened with the booking, the katanas, the kick out, all of it. I actually thought Mercedes kind of went into business for herself with the kick out, but it was super tough to say that. Maybe she was meant to block the 3rd katana and therefore there wasn't supposed to be a cover, but I don't know, man. The whole thing was convoluted and odd. Even going the lengths, though, of 3 katanas didn't make sense. Sheeta always wins with 1, 2 should have been enough. And even commentary pointed out what I said on the Ultimate Preview after the match. Mercedes won again without utilizing Camille. So why is she even around as the heavy? What is her purpose exactly? Monet has now beaten Willow Nightingale, Britt Baker, and Sheeta on her own as a heel. This was headed for a higher grade at parts, but man, it fell apart. 3 stars, B-. You could argue it was the worst match of the night. I don't think it was the worst, but you could definitely make that argument. We had Willow Nightingale against Chris Statlander in a street fight. Renee did a sit-down with both of them on Collision, so there was a real go-home segment, as we hoped there would be when we taped the Ultimate Preview. Stat was angry that she was there for Willow when she arrived, but her TBS title reign was all about her. There's never even a thought of giving Stat a title rematch she deserved. There were some bad cuts here. Nightingale blamed Stokely Hathaway, repeating that she was blindsided. Stat did 80% of the talking here, and Willow was the far better promo, so that really didn't make sense. It did help build some. The feud, I mentioned it lost a lot of steam over the last 6 weeks, and I was still expecting a superb match coming out of this. Moving to the All Out match.
Oh, we got 2 big meaty men bumping me tonight.
Willow had some cool braids. Stat powerbombed her off the apron through the announce table, which collapsed like it was made of Jenga blocks. They really need to reconceptualize those tables. Willow moved off a regular table, with Stat putting herself through it with a swanton bomb. Then Stat got pounced through a barricade wall. Willow broke 3 light tubes over Stat's head, and I think there was hardway blood there. Stat then drove her off the stage through 2 tables. Stat strangely watched Willow just wrap a chain around her hand, only to get beat with it. Willow then bit her head, and this was the second time that happened in 4 matches to start the show. Thumbtacks came out. Stat somehow did a split onto them. I think she missed an axe kick. Willow landed a Death Valley driver on the thumbtacks. Stat then hit an avalanche Spanish fly and a discus lariat with the chain for a false finish before turning it into a strap match with a chain attached to both of their wrists. Willow used that for a spinebuster. Stat then hit a tombstone pile driver and choked Nightingale with the chain to get the win. I absolutely loved this match.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
They beat the shit out of one another and continued a trend of AEW women's street fights delivering on major shows. For Stat to get a decisive victory like that was key, given the machinations of the feud, the way Willow has pretty much gotten up on her at every turn, and of course the fact that Stat does need to get built up. and Willow can afford a loss. I found it rather flawless in terms of execution. Some won't like Willow being defeated clean like that, but for me, it was refreshing to see a heel just straight up win in that manner. Now, you can also say, look, this was one of numerous matches on the show that had kind of a convoluted finish. It wasn't straight up. But as far as I'm concerned, if you're in a street fight and you choke someone out with a chain, that's a legitimate win. I went 4.25 stars and an A here. I have a feeling some are going to be higher than it. But when you actually watch the match itself and not just think about some of the big spots that made highlights, it was a lower A match and not a higher A, and certainly not an A+. But again, that is not discounting anything. It was still fantastic. And an A is a great grade for a match like this. Let's move to the Continental Championship. Kazuchika Okada against 3 challengers to be determined. The qualifiers all happened on Collision. Mark Briscoe bladed and beat Lance Archer after 3 elbow drops in a pretty good TV match. Orange Cassidy took down Brian Keith. This was the worst of the qualifiers by a significant margin. And then Konosuke Takeshita obviously beat the Beast Mortos to take the final spot. There was a really scary moment here, but everyone was okay. So we got the exact 3 qualifiers we expected. Orange stopped an Okada Takeshita stare down, and then he dominated both of them, which was ridiculous. The faces did elbow drops off the apron ringside. Takeshita did a nice double tope suicida ringside. Briscoe did his chair-aided tope. We finally got Okada Takeshita with a blue thunder bomb, ending that face-to-face. Briscoe ultimately reversed a Rainmaker. Takeshita hung on to a Stundog Millionaire attempt, hitting a seated slam and a tilt-a-whirl German suplex. That was a great sequence. Briscoe caught him with Jay Driller for a broken fall. Takeshita blocked Froggy Bow with his knees and hit a pump knee for a broken fall. Then he hit Orange with a Superman punch. Okada ultimately avoided a near fall from Orange and caught him with Rainmaker to get the squeaky clean victory. This started exceptionally slow, and I was thinking, man, this is going to underdeliver given the talent of these wrestlers. But midway through, it did pick up significant steam, and it ended well with Kazuchika Okada getting a clean fall for a change. This felt like a high-quality TV main event, like one of those 25-minute Collision matches, but on a pay-per-view. A couple silly spots mixed in. There was some good wrestling as well. I'm at 3.75 stars, B+. The tag team championships are on the line. The Young Bucks defending against Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta. Blackpool Combat Club and Pac beat the Elite in 29 minutes, and that match crossed over from Collision to Rampage in hopes of keeping audience. I would presume it worked from a rating standpoint. As a viewer, it was ridiculously long. BCC won with the swing shotgun dropkick finisher on Nick Jackson. That gave them a win ahead of this title match at All Out. This was second on the card. Claudio went on a nice power run. He did 3 running European uppercuts into the barricade. The faces did a toss off the top rope into a buck draped over the middle rope. Yuta got a seatbelt near fall. The Bucks broke cattle mutilation with a swanton bomb. Claudio took an EVP trigger for a broken fall. Claudio then stopped another and hit a double suplex into an extended swing. The faces did a superplex, but Matt Jackson got knees up on an attempted splash to follow, winning with a tight cover as Nick held Claudio's leg. Interesting finish to an unremarkable match that had some bright spots the crowd enjoyed. It was a TV match with a TV finish forced onto this card for no good reason, and we talked about that on the Ultimate Preview, but it was solid across the board. It's a B, 3.25 stars, so I have this barely above the Mercedes match. They're really the same. Both of these were the weakest matches on the show, no matter how you want to slice it. On 0 Hour, we had Undisputed Kingdom against Shane Taylor Promotions. The Beast Mortos was with Shane Taylor, and then Top Flight as the third team. The promotion for this on Rampage was that there would be a big winner's purse for the match, but a number was never announced. Roderick Strong was angry at Mortos for working with a different team when they had been fighting together, and there was a fun back and forth between them. I'm glad that was at least explained, because it would have otherwise been completely nonsensical for him to fight against guys he had been aligned with for months. This was easily the best 0 Hour match. Mortos had an awesome, I guess it was a tope suicida tornillo, also a pop-up headbutt into his mask. He's been so much fun to watch. It just sucks that he hasn't won anything during this entire stretch. Strong ultimately got the fall, and they celebrated by running around the ring with their arms up almost as if they had won a championship. Fair enough. They have been getting their asses kicked for months. I don't have a grade here. I don't have a grade for any of the 0 Hour matches. There were others. Bang Bang Gang beat Dark Order. Acclaimed beat Iron Savages. And then a Dustin Rhodes, Sammy Guevara hologram trio beat Premier Athletes. Now, none of these matches were announced until 3 hours before the show began. I actually wrote those results down before the matches even happened because it was obvious as usual. It would have been nice to do like a women's trios match or something a little bit different. Maybe this is an effort to like reestablish the tag and trios divisions, but hiding it all on a pre-show card is not going to accomplish that. And lastly, Mariah May, backstage at Collision, announced a championship celebration for All Out. The camera kept moving back and forth as she spoke. She went in and out of focus. It was really odd and frankly terrible camera work. Even if it was purposeful, it didn't work and it was just bad. My expectation seeing the segment was Toni Storm would attack to continue their feud. Possibly we'd get the return of a notable women's wrestler like Anna Jay or Julia Hart or something. Sky Blue came out in crutches on 0 Hour. She looked totally normal in a red dress, no more spooky shit. May interrupted, saying she decided not to do her celebration in Chicago. She actually had a good line about it being the Windy City, yet no one there being blown before. Sky called her a skank, which got zero reaction. May pushed her, threw some shots, and then she went to attack her with a crutch, only for Queen Aminata to grab it out of her hand. And I guess they're going to have a title match coming up soon. I'm glad there's going to be a reason for it. But what the fuck has Aminata done to earn a match against May? This was quite bad. So that wraps up AEW All Out, the entire card broken down for you with results, analysis, and grades as always. But it is now time to move to our final grade for AEW All Out. And before we do that, we need to give you a heads up about our pre-show expectation grades. Now, the Silver King shared his on the Ultimate Preview episode, and all of you are Getting Overheads got to vote in our poll on Twitter at Getting Overcast. Now, a mea culpa for me, because of college football, I unfortunately forgot to do the poll until really late, close to the start of the show. So it was a much smaller sample size than usual. It came out at 26% A, 46% B, 23% C, 5% D to F. That 5% is silly. There is no way in the world this show was going to be anywhere worse than a C, right? Especially given the card. Anyway, that averaged out to an 85 out of 100, a flat B. I'm going to upgrade that to an 86, maybe if not an 87, just because of the short timing, and you can't count those 5% D or F. It's just ridiculous. Now, my pre-show expectation grade coming out of the Ultimate Preview was an 89 out of 100, the highest B+ possible. And if you remember on that Ultimate Preview, I stated that it probably wouldn't take that much for AEW to exceed expectations because the card was strong and there was the potential for some great matches. Now, before I get into the final grades, I know I already gave somewhat of an analysis of the entire card after we discussed the main event, but a couple other items for you. I loved that this was an 8-match main card. Now, the matches went really long because of that. I think the shortest one was 15 minutes, and that's not the end of the world. I mean, 15-minute matches and longer are what I like, but there were also numerous long matches. I think there were 4 matches that went near 30 minutes, or at least 25 minutes or longer. That's a lot in a single show. For an 8-match card on a Saturday with NFL Week 1 coming on Sunday, there's really not a good reason for people to stay up that late. When, again, I'll repeat, you could have easily just not had the Continental title match, easily not had the either TBS title match. I know you want Mercedes on the card. The AEW tag team title match. Those did not need to be on this show. Could have been shorter, sweeter, and honestly better. I'd have more energy right now. But I did like that it was an 8-man card, or 8-match card, I'm sorry. No matter what happened on 0 Hour, that was totally overkill. That does not factor into the show grade. I didn't want to forget to shout out Jim Ross. He has gotten a lot of criticism over recent years, but his gravitas on the mic and his ability to convey moral outrage added a ton to both co-main events as well as the post-match attack of Danielson in particular. There may be arguments about greatest wrestling announcer of all time, but no one can touch JR when he becomes indignant at someone crossing the line, breaking societal norms, doing things that are simply not supposed to be done in or around a wrestling ring. He was stellar during the show, deserves a lot of credit. There were even parts where, as you listened to him, you thought, does he actually not like this? Is he legitimately angry at what's going on? And of course, that's not the case because he showed up for the show and he knew exactly what was going to happen on it. But nevertheless, I mean, it's pretty damn interesting. I already discussed the violence, so we're not going to rehash that. Although, of course, again, I do wonder coming out of this show, is this what people want from professional wrestling? Is this what people want from AEW? Is this what AEW is telling us it is going to be now moving forward? Is it going to be that All Out is this kind of show every year? We've seen a lot of this, by the way, on Dynamite as well. Not suffocation and not, syringes and stuff, but glass bottles being broken over people's heads, MJF nearly killing Daniel Garcia. Like, there's been a lot of this on TV recently. You have the Mox storyline ongoing. There's a lot of questions up in the air about what this product is going to be going forward. But moving off of that to more of a wrestling aspect for the show, it was extremely strong across the board. I mean, really high quality matches. You heard the grades that I gave out. All of those are, of course, my legitimate opinion. But despite enjoying a lot of the matches, there were a lot of finishes that were kind of, womp womp, that kind of fell short at the end. Some of them had reason to happen. Others were just kind of like escape routes to get out of bookings without someone just getting beaten. And I think you saw in certain cases here, examples being Ospreay against Pac, Willow against Stat. I should say Stat against Willow since Stat got the win. The main event, Hangman over Swerve to a degree. When you get a decisive winner, it is so much more impactful than when you get a roll-up or a fold-over cover or someone's feet are held or you have a million false finishes and then just win with a low blow. Like, that type of shit doesn't really play. And unfortunately, on an 8-match card, I did not do a count, but I want to say at least half, if not more than half, of the matches had one of those examples that I just provided. And that did take away a little bit for me from the show. So before I give you my grade, let me go ahead and share with you your grade, our Getting Overheads, how you voted on Twitter at Getting Overcast. Now, there is a little bit of time left in the poll as we tape this, but the numbers generally do not change that much. And this is a super interesting result. I cannot remember a time where I've seen a grade so, I don't want to say evenly split across the board, but pretty much so. So 24.4% have this as an A+ to an A. 25.6% have it as an A- to a B+. That is literally 50%. Then 35.9% have it as a B to a B-, and 14.1% have it at C+ or lower. And normally, if this was a regular show that did not have all the violence and some of the stuff that we talked about, and this was given a C+, I would say that is absolutely ridiculous. Almost I don't even want to count those grades. But because of the violence and because of the way this show transpired, I can absolutely understand some people watching that and saying that was not at all for me. It's not what I want out of professional wrestling. And that show was a C+ or lower. So I do find the grades to be legitimate in that case. That averages out to an 86.92. So round up to a 87 out of 100, which is a B+. It is higher than all of you voted, of course, on the pre-show expectation grade, but certainly lower than my pre-show expectation grade, which was an 89 out of 100. And I'm right on the border again here. There was a while as the show was beginning, I would say all the way through the Willow and Stat match, because you had Ospreay, Pac, and Willow Stat back to back, where I was saying to myself, okay, it's probably not going to be an A+ show, but this has a chance to be a really high A show. It was headed in that direction. And then shit just kind of fell off to a degree. And then you add in the violent aspect of everything. And my grade kept ticking down a little bit, more and more as the show kind of continued. And ultimately, I was left perplexed for all of the reasons that I shared with you earlier. Is this what I expected coming into All Out? Is this what I want from professional wrestling? Did I enjoy myself or did I cringe while watching? And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending which, glass half full, glass half empty you want to look, which perspective you want to take, it's both. It is. I hated this show and I loved this show. I did. I hated some of the violence. I just thought it was over the top, unnecessary, and frankly ridiculous in 2024. I loved some of the wrestling. I mean, Ospreay and Pac and what we got with Stat and Willow, that is my shit. There's no question about that. Even within some of the violent aspects I didn't like, I enjoyed the BCC turn on Bryan. The unsanctioned match, if I could pull out a couple items that I didn't like from it, the syringe and the unprotected headshot and, the mess up on the buckshot lariat attempt or whatever the case might be, pull some of those out. That's a freaking fantastic hardcore match. But you can't just eliminate the things you don't like and keep the things you do. That's kind of my problem at the end of the day. So I said that AEW wouldn't need to do much to exceed my expectation. And that's true. They didn't have to do that much, yet they did. And ultimately, I'm going to give this show an A-. I'm going to give it a 91 out of 100. So it raised up, 2 points from where I had it on the pre-show expectation. But I can't give a show like that with some of what transpired on that show, with many of the issues I had within the show. I cannot give that a grade, a high A grade, an A+, or anything. It doesn't even come close. And as you can tell by the numerical grade, it's far closer to a B+ than it is an A. In fact, now that I'm even saying it and speaking about it to this degree, I'm changing my grade right now. It's going to a 90 out of 100. It's an A-, skin of the teeth over a B+, because of some of the incredible aspects of the show. Ospreay, Pac, Willow, Stat, the BCC turn. I mean, there was enough there that was super interesting. But still, there were large swaths of that show that I just really had no desire to see, both when it came to matches, like the Young Bucks and Claudio, with Wheeler, and then some of those individual extreme violent moments that just weren't my taste in 2024. And honestly, I don't think they ever would have been, even when I was younger. I'm not a prude, not someone who is pearl clutching. To each their own, do whatever the hell you want. But, I don't watch professional wrestling for that. Not these days, and certainly not since I was tape trading back in the day, trying to, get some Japanese death matches and crazy shit with Terry Funk and Onita and some of that stuff. So, folks, that wraps up this instant analysis edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Tried to do the absolute best I could given the hour to break down everything that happened at AEW All Out, provide some perspective analysis, grades, reaction, all that good stuff we do here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Allow me to remind you, of course, that we will be back on Tuesday with our next WWE episode, an absolute ton to talk about already on that show. And then on Thursday, we'll have Fallout from AEW All Out and a pretty big show for NXT coming up. All of that will be covered in the second episode next week. Don't forget to subscribe if you're a first-time listener. We'd greatly appreciate it. And on the way out, allow me to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can vote in the polls we talked about. You can send in questions and comments for the show. We do try to read them on the air. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You're an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audios to every major show in 5 minutes or less, technically 6 minutes or less. And you get exclusive news posts on Fridays as well. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thank you all for joining us and listening to this instant analysis edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We will be back on Tuesday with our WWE episode. It is time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.